The women's rights movement evolved during the 1800s and continued to be very popular during the 1920s. Some of the most important events took place during the years of 1960 through 1970. During this time, support was being gained for a popular movement that challenged modern-day beliefs. The women's movement of the 1960s and 1970s drew inspiration from the civil rights movement. It was made up of mainly members of the middle class, and thus partook of the spirit of rebellion that affected large segments of middle-class youth in the 1960s. To begin with, there are many contributors who made this movement successful. One of the greatest contributors of the 1960s was Betty Friedan. Her book, The Feminine Mystique, showed the widespread problem of women's unhappiness. Throughout the book, there are countless examples of how males dominated the majority of society, as well as women's lives. This book allowed millions of women to find their own personal identities, rather than succumb to society. Other women such as Gloria Steinem helped reach a high tide in the early 1970s. She and several other women began a magazine called Miss. Between 1971 through 1976, they published handbooks called Our Bodies, Ourselves. This handbook focused on women's health and sold over 850,000 copies.
Different organizations contributed to the change as well. Women themselves took measures for new improvement. The National Women's Suffrage Association, or NAWSA, was established by Elizabeth Stanton and advocated suffrage by states. They believed that if all the states approved it, then they would have to pass the 19th Amendment. The National American Women's Suffrage Association was established to fight for the right to vote. In 1966, 28 professional women, including Betty Friedan, established the National Organization of Women, or NOW, to, quote, to take action to bring American women into full participation in the mainstream of American society, unquote. By the next year, 1,000 women had joined. 4 years later, membership reached to 15,000. NOW and similar organizations help make women increasingly aware of their limited opportunities and strengthen the resolve to increase them. Slowly but surely, change began. The passage of the 19th Amendment in 1919 prohibited any U.S. citizen a right to vote based on their sex. In the Mueller versus Oregon case, Louise D. Brandeis persuaded the Supreme Court to accept the laws on protecting women in the workplace. She used substantial evidence to plead her case, which was eventually won. For example, the T-shirt fire. Some activists passed for ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, or the ERA, to the Constitution. Passed by Congress in 1972, it declared that equality rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Over the next several years, 35 of the necessary 38 states ratified it. The courts also promoted sexual equality. In 1973, the Supreme Court in Roe v. Wade sanctioned women's rights to abortion during the early months of pregnancy, a significant victory for the women's movement. However, the movement extinguished because it failed to reach out to the citizens outside the middle class. There also became a split between moderate and radical feminism. The movement ultimately died when the Equal Rights Amendment failed to get approved by the 38 states needed for its ratification.